oil has not facilitated our development because we neglected other areas that made us who we were before oil came. Not even one local refinery can give us our petrol and diesel. Well, the same system, the consequences. Well, let me go. If I may illustrate my points by a brief narration of my experience, this picture will become clearer. I was born in 1952 to a father who was a politician, a member of the Eastern House of Assembly and regional minister. When I started primary school in 1957, my classmate, Peter, was the junior brother of my father's driver. Other mates of mine were children of farmers, coal miners, traders, dispensers, teachers. My first primary school, St. Patrick's River Valley, was in rural Enugu, very close to the coal mines. My senior brother, who is here, Ohaneze, and my late sister, Cecilia, were in the same school. House boys and house girls in our family attended the same school as we did. There was no school for the children of the rich or privileged and another school for the children of the less privileged. The fees were affordable. Cars hardly brought us to school, in spite of the fact that the school was 2.5 miles from our home. When Daddy's driver ever came for us, because he was traveling to his constituency on a weekend and needed to take us along, the driver would park outside the school gate and we would try to quickly run to the car after dismissal to escape abuses from our classmates. We must also pick our driver's brother and all others whose homes were on our way in order to reduce the number of classmates protesting against a one-day luxury we enjoyed in 1 month. At secondary school, my first deployment for morning functions landed me in a public urinary. My father was a minister then. The white reverend brothers in charge of my school, College of Immaculate Conception, Enugu, didn't care who your father was. In fact, I believe I was deployed to the public urinary to ensure that I didn't regard myself as special. The urinary was filled with spirogyra and smelly. I had to buy an iron brush to cope with the cleaning and some Dettol to disinfect the place, as well as protect myself from infection. After 1 month of keeping a clean urinary, I was commended in a morning assembly and deployed to look after a flower bed. The lesson was obvious. There is no big man's son here. Because I showed no dissatisfaction, I was able to pass the test. Because of my primary school experiences and holiday experiences with my grandmothers, which informed my willful obedience, I was rewarded with appointment as a class prefect. That time, every holidays, we were sent to my grandmother in the village. There was no pipe-borne water. We trekked 3 miles to fetch water until Okpara put a borehole in our place. And I went with my village age mates. And it was a pleasure to trek 3 miles, know them, enjoy the culture. I speak my language better than most poor families, children in my community, in spite of the fact that my father was minister. But today, the children of the big men hardly speak their local language. They hardly even visit their villages. Notwithstanding the level of intelligence of a rich man's child, his child must go to a very good school or a very expensive school. Sometimes the admission is bought. In my university experience in the University of Ibadan, between 1972 and 1976, I was elected Student Union President in favor of a Yoruba opponent by a majority Yoruba student electorate. Nobody cared where you came from. I was just fresh from the war and a Biafran soldier. I had never visited Ibadan all my life until then. I sat for entrance exams in Aba. Even though we lived in Enugu, there was only one center for University of Ibadan in Eastern Nigeria then. There was no center in Enugu. Sleeping in Aba is another story I won't tell today. Our generation was challenged to be hardworking and to dare your over-preparedness. The nation was training its successors, like secondary school where I had expatriate teachers from India and the United Kingdom. University of Ibadan had teachers from all continents of the world. One of my teachers pitied me so much because I missed quite a number of lectures attending students' union duties that he arranged private classes for me. He taught me financial accounting. His name is Professor Enyan. This built my sense of sacrifice, my patriotism, my eventual desire to go into public service. We must all resolve to banish this monetized economy and way of life. Merit in our country has disappeared in appointments, in elections, and lately in award of university degrees. Sometimes you meet a professor who can hardly speak good English, and you begin to wonder how he wrote his thesis. He or she probably monetized the process. The worst situation is to find a minister who has been the equivalent of a director and who has never been the equivalent of a director in a ministry, or whose educational qualification and exposure is obtained in compromising circumstances. You see why we got here. These days, a minister is taken for Senate hearing and is asked to take a bow. In Shagari's ministerial list, His Excellency Emeka Anyoko and I were nominated from all Anambra State under the leadership of the Senate by Senator late President Joe Wires, may his soul rest in peace. We were not patronized by any take a bow. We were thoroughly grilled by a Senate subcommittee. Inquiries of you were made in your previous educational institutions and workplaces. Your policy conception and execution capacity were extracted by hypothetical questions, mirroring anticipated challenges you may face in your ministry. Today, it is take a bow. Sometimes, I wonder whether the senators are too busy to do more intensive interrogations. The effect is that we leave behind for our children no tradition of how we recruit public officers. So when they get up and portray their unpreparedness for such exalted offices, nobody is surprised. The civil servants find no motivation from a leader without a goal, an experience, or a drive for excellence. It is all patronage, they say. No wonder a minister turns a ministry account into a private account, and after all the noise of her arrest, nobody hears of how much is recovered or any prosecution. Going forward, I advise that we should have more scrutiny at INEC and National Assembly levels of qualifications of those who aspire to public offices in our country. In the last 2 years, the standard of living of the average Nigerian has dangerously plummeted. The president meant well when he decided to remove oil subsidy. The intention was to free resources in order to stimulate production and so growth well across the board. Unfortunately, the administrative organization of the country and the recurrent process of political heads, recruitment process of political heads at the state and local governments did not help his vision. In many developed countries of the world, local governments are rich and carry on enormous responsibilities like education, water supply, agricultural investments, road development, security, and industrial promotion. In this country, governors basically choose local government chairmen. The elections that are held are a formality to window dress a carefully rehearsed arrangement. The process can continue with impunity. In fact, it has even extended to houses of assembly. Recently in Lagos State, the State Assembly was ordered to reverse its decisions on its leadership selection, what is normally an internal affairs of the legislature. The failure of the subsidy injection into vital productive areas of the economy has led to limited growth and an unprecedented high cost of living. Most low-wage earners can hardly afford a basic standard of living. School fees, transport costs, house rents for homes have experienced, in some cases, 100% increase, wiping away the relief expected from percentage increase in salary emoluments. In the education sector, A clear divide of schools for the wealthy families and schools for the poor families has come to stay. This tendency breeds deep and growing sense of deprivation and bitterness that is likely to affect the relationship amongst this generation of our children. Crime has risen to a dangerous scale, and the law enforcement agents are overstretched. I tell you a story. When I went to College of Immaculate Conception, my secondary school, I had two classmates who were recipients of my father's scholarship, Gregory and Sylvester. They are both dead now, may their soul rest in peace. Gregory became eventually the head of Anambra Imo River Basin Authority. Sylvester became a professor of philosophy. When we were in class 1 and 2, Gregory and Sylvester were beating me in class. When the results came to my father's office, we went for the report cards. And Gregory and Sylvester will be the first 7 in the class. I will be struggling to be between the 7th and 12th out of a class of 30. And my father would call us to talk to us about our results. And my father would tell me, "You are a finished boy, you know." He would say it in Igbo, and I'll translate it to you. Those whose father has courtesy to me, you will eventually courtesy to them. And I will say to him in Igbo, if this is a cause, it will never happen. He said to me, but it is happening. What am I trying to say? The son of the farmer who had potential had brighter prospects than the son of a minister. I never exceeded them until I came into real life. And I was able to help them to get good employments that enabled them to reach the zenith of their career. But their opportunity recognized their potential. And they gave their best and they rose as high as they could. That is not possible today. The major constitutional reforms of this country have been influenced more by the military. That led us to a command and control structure rather than a political structure. In most developed countries of the world, with our kind of political structure, a state government cannot interfere with the day-to-day administration of a local government area. This denial of effective control of local government resources and accompanying financial regulations to ensure accountability has led to misuse of local government funds, absence of concrete achievements at that level, and the attraction of that office by those who are competent enough to elevate its capability. Netherlands is the second largest exporter of food in the world, coming after the United States of America. Its cross-sectional area is about 0.5% of Niger State of Nigeria. It is the world's largest exporter of potatoes. Its revenue from vegetables and dairy contribute more than 100 billion annually to its economy in dollars. The secret is education, better mechanized farming, growth of green farm technology, drone monitoring systems, and land reclamation by building of dams. Why can't we do better with our vast land resources? Mr. Chairman, there was a time when the mainstay of our economy was agriculture. The North had granite pyramids, cotton and livestock. The West had cocoa, Midwest had rubber and palm oil, and the East had palm produce, cashew nuts and cassava. At the same time that these agricultural yields were booming, we had an exponential growth of import substitution industries. Textile mills were established in the North and in the East. Cement factories, breweries, iron and steel complexes, power stations flourished. New universities were built and maintained to meet international standards. Our secondary schools attracted students from all other African countries, especially those like the Sudan, who were in turmoil. Our reputation in the West African Examination Council results were the highest. Our finished products were demanded in renowned world universities. There was only one reason why things worked so well then. We had a regional system of government that allowed regions to enjoy sovereignty over their natural resources whilst paying royalties and taxes to the federal government. Our domestic security was independent, uncontrolled by federal government. Suddenly, the army came and abrogated our constitution, turned us into a unitary state, and imposed a unitary constitution on us. Our constitution was promulgated by a group of military men who were unelected. There was no equality of representation of the various regions in the drafting of the constitution. They carved us into states and local governments without any known parameter or plebiscite. They seized our natural resources and donated them to the federal government to share without adequate respect for derivation. Our constitution is not touched on us. It claims to have been made by we, the people of Nigeria. But this was falsehood. We didn't have a referendum or a plebiscite for it, nor did we have an elected assembly to debate and ratify it. It was simply imposed on us. With it came the worst form of participatory democracy that our country has ever seen. Today, there is the dictatorship of the political parties. Candidates are imposed on the people without transparent primaries. In some cases, no primaries take place at all. Governors have become appointing authorities for candidates for elective offices in their states. You cannot become a candidate without the governor's approval in today's Nigeria. The nomination congresses are just a matter of formality. Where governors are resisted in this form of nomination, the richest candidate buys the position. Of course, where the politician disgorges with the electorate, the tendency to recoup at the center is almost inevitable. The smart ones escape but a few are jailed. They come out of jail with their ill-gotten wealth and still remain relevant. The Electoral Commission, the security services, the courts are constantly manipulated by the rich politicians. Our electoral system has become corrupted and unattractive to honest and brilliant citizens. The mess continues. What must be done to avert this coming catastrophe? Nigeria must restructure and give its component units sovereignty over its natural resources, provided they pay royalty or some form of taxation to the federal government to maintain federal responsibilities like external defense, foreign missions, customs, and immigration. In this way, true democracy will evolve and the speed of development increased. Emphasis must return to agriculture and education. Education must emphasize on Renaissance digital orientation. Domestic security must remain in the hands of federating units. The secularity of the Nigerian state must be respected. These irresistible minimum conditions are non-negotiable. If it does not happen, we have no alternative but to go our separate ways. Processes to begin our restructuring as a nation must be concluded before the 2027 elections, so as to avert a situation where sections of the country may boycott elections and present the country with a constitutional force majeure. I'd like to end this speech by quoting William Shakespeare in Julius Caesar, where he said, and I quote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, taken at the flood, leads to fortune. Omitted all the voyage of their life, is bound in shadows and in miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take current when it serves, or lose our ventures." Thank you for your kind attention.